The prairie wind whispered secrets through Sarah's small cabin, carrying the scent of wild sage and distant thunder. But Sarah barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the delicate lace and pearl-strewn fabric draped over her sewing basket, her wedding veil. Each stitch had been a whisper of hope, a dream woven into white silk. She imagined her strong, kind husband, Thomas, waiting for her by the old oak tree, and the way the veil would catch the sunlight as she walked towards him. It was a vision that filled her heart with warmth, a bright star guiding her through the quiet days on their remote claim. Sarah had spent countless evenings, long after the supper dishes were put away, adding tiny beads and intricate patterns to the veil. It wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a promise, a symbol of the new life she and Thomas were building together. Their little cabin, nestled in the vast expanse of the prairie, felt like a haven. Soon, it would be a home for two. The wedding was set for late summer, when the fields would be golden and the sky a brilliant blue. She would wear the veil, a testament to her love and the future they shared. She'd even imagined her mother, back east, smiling at its beauty. The veil was perfect, a treasure made with her own hands and filled with all her hopes. The golden summer Sarah had envisioned for her wedding never quite arrived. Instead, a different kind of wind swept across the prairie, one that carried a chill not found in any season. Whispers began to spread, not of harvest and celebrations, but of a strange, creeping sickness. At first, it was just a cough here, a fever there, dismissed as the usual aches of country life. But soon, the coughs grew harsher, the fevers burned hotter, and the aches turned into deep, bone-weary pain. Families who had always been bustling with activity suddenly fell silent. The sounds of children playing vanished from the dusty lanes. Dr. Miller, the nearest physician, who usually visited once a month, found himself writing almost daily, his face growing grimmer with each passing sunrise. Homes that had once smelled of fresh bread and wood smoke now carried a different, unsettling odor. The acrid scent of sickness, of sweat-soaked linens and unwashed bodies. Sarah heard stories from Thomas when he returned from town. Old Mr. Henderson was too weak to even lift his head, and little Annie McGregor couldn't stop coughing. The cheerful greetings in the general store turned into hushed conversations about who was sick next and how many had taken to their beds. This was no ordinary ailment. It was a shadow creeping over their beloved prairie community, making healthy folks very ill very quickly. The chilling news reached Sarah's ears like a cold wind through a broken window. Her heart ached for Mrs. O'Malley, whose usually rosy cheeks were now pale and sunken, and for little Timmy, who lay burning with fever, his small body shaking with chills. Sarah spent her days helping where she could, bringing cool cloths to fevered brows and offering comforting words. She saw firsthand the suffering, the worry etched on the faces of healthy family members, the way strong men grew weak and children cried softly in their beds. Dr. Miller, looking tired and drawn, explained that he was running low on the specific remedies that might truly help. "It's a strong fever," he said one afternoon, wiping sweat from his brow, "and it needs strong medicine. Quinine is what they need, and good quality spirits to bring down the fever. But it's dear, Sarah, very dear, and hard to come by in these parts, especially now." His words echoed in Sarah's mind. Dear, very dear. She knew what that meant. It meant money, more money than most prairie families had to spare, especially when they were too sick to work. The usual home remedies, the poultices and herbal teas, weren't enough for this sickness. Her friends, her neighbors, the very people who had welcomed her to the prairie, needed proper medicine, the kind that cost a lot. Sarah felt a deep ache in her chest, a mix of sorrow and a growing sense of helplessness. How could she help them get what they needed? The image of little Timmy's flushed face and Mrs. O'Malley's weak cough stayed with Sarah day and night. She paced her small cabin, her mind racing. She had little money saved, certainly not enough for the costly medicine Dr. Miller described. Her few valuables were heirlooms, family keepsakes that felt wrong to part with. Then, her gaze fell upon the sewing basket, where the veil lay, a cascade of white lace and gleaming pearls. A A sharp pang of sorrow pierced her heart. This veil, her dream, her promise of a future with Thomas. It was the most valuable thing she owned, not just in sentiment, but in actual worth. Selling it felt like tearing a piece of her very soul. How could she walk down the aisle without it? How could she tell Thomas? But then she thought of the quiet homes, the fading laughter, the urgent need for healing. Was a beautiful piece of lace more important than a child's life or a neighbor's recovery? Slowly, carefully, Sarah picked up the veil. The silk felt soft against her fingers, each pearl a tiny, cold tear. Her eyes blurred, but a new kind of resolve hardened her jaw. The wedding could wait. The dreams could be remade. But lives, once lost, cannot be brought back. With a deep, shaky breath, Sarah folded the veil, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and tucked it into her market basket. It was a heartbreaking choice, but in her heart, she knew it was the only one she could make. The next morning, with the veiled bundle clutched tight in her basket, Sarah made the long, dusty trek to the trading post. The usual cheerful bustle of the place was gone, replaced by a hushed, anxious air. Mr. Abernathy, the proprietor, a man usually quick with a joke, looked tired and grim. He was behind the counter, wiping down a small metallic object. It glinted dully under the dim light filtering through the grimy window. Sarah recognized it as a tin syringe, one of the few medical tools available in these parts. "Morning, Sarah," Mr. Abernathy said, his voice low. "Another day, another fever." He sighed, placing the syringe carefully on a shelf. "Doc Miller was just in. Says he's almost out of everything. Folks are burning up, sweating through their sheets. The air in some of those homes, it's heavy with it. You can smell the sickness." He shook his head. "And the quinine. He says it's the only thing that truly cuts through this fever. Powerful stuff, quinine. Got that metallic tang, but it works, if you can get it." Sarah took a deep breath, her hands tightening around the basket handle. "Mr. Abernathy," she began, her voice a little shaky. I need to get some of that medicine. For my neighbors." She lifted the cloth, revealing the soft folds of her veil. "I have this. It's my wedding veil. I made it myself. It's silk with real pearls. Will you take it? For enough to buy the medicine." Mr. Abernathy's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, then understanding, passing over his weary face. He reached out a calloused hand, gently touching the lace. Mr. Abernathy looked at the veil, then at Sarah's determined face. He understood. Without a word, he counted out a pile of coins, more than Sarah had expected. "This should get you the quinine, and a little extra for good measure," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "Tell Doc Miller I'll be sending over what supplies I can scrounge up too." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she took the money, a mix of relief and profound sadness washing over her. The veil was gone, but the possibility of healing glimmered. She hurried to Dr. Miller, who, upon seeing the money, let out a long, weary breath. He quickly sent a rider to the nearest large town, knowing every hour counted. When the precious bottles of quinine arrived, their metallic scent filling the air, Sarah worked tirelessly alongside the doctor. She helped measure out doses, careful with every drop. She brought small cups of the bitter liquid to Mrs. O'Malley, who slowly, painstakingly, began to sip it. She spoon-fed it to little Timmy, who, after a few days, began to stir more easily and ask for water. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a change began to happen. The burning fevers cooled. The terrible coughs lessened. The haunted looks on the faces of family members softened into cautious hope. Sarah moved from house to house, a quiet angel of mercy, offering not just medicine, but also comfort, a gentle touch, and a hopeful smile. Each small sign of recovery, each breath drawn more easily, each child's eye opening to look at her, was a greater reward than any wedding veil could ever be. The prairie community began to heal, one dose of medicine, one comforting presence at a time. As the weeks turned into months, the dark cloud that had hung over the prairie slowly lifted. The sickness, thanks to Sarah's sacrifice and Dr. Miller's tireless work, finally loosened its grip. The coughs faded into memory, The fevers became a distant nightmare. Children's laughter once again echoed across the fields, brighter and more precious than ever. The smell of fresh-baked bread returned to the air, replacing the metallic tang of quinine and the damp scent of fevered sheets. The general store buzzed with chatter, not of illness, but of crops, weather, and plans for the upcoming harvest festival. Neighbors visited each other, sharing stories and helping hands, their bond strengthened by the hardship they had faced together. Mrs. O'Malley, now fully recovered, often brought Sarah fresh eggs or a warm pie, her eyes full of silent thanks. Little Timmy, his cheeks rosy again, would run up to Sarah whenever he saw her, holding out a wildflower or a smooth river stone. The prairie town, once quieted by fear, now hummed with renewed life. Folks worked their fields with a vigor born of gratitude, knowing how close they had come to losing so much. The threat of the epidemic had passed, leaving behind a deeper appreciation for life and for one another. Sarah still missed her veil, especially when she thought of her postponed wedding, but seeing the healthy faces of her friends, hearing their happy voices, filled that empty space with a different kind of joy. The community was whole again, healthy and happy, a vibrant tapestry of lives woven together by shared hardship and quiet heroism. Just as life in the prairie settlement settled into a comfortable rhythm of work and quiet joy, a shadow appeared on the horizon, not of a storm cloud, but of a man. His name was Silas Blackwood, and he rode into town on a fancy horse, dressed in city clothes that seemed out of place on the dusty main street. He wasn't there to trade, or farm, or even to settle. He was a land speculator, a man who sniffed out weaknesses and exploited them for profit. Blackwood quickly learned of Sarah and Thomas's land claim. He had heard whispers of the sickness that had swept through the area months ago, and how some folks had neglected their paperwork during the crisis. He knew the land office rules were strict. If you didn't keep up with certain filings, especially on homestead claims, your rights could be challenged. He saw an opportunity. One sunny afternoon, as Sarah was tending her small garden, a shadow fell over her. She looked up to see Blackwood dismounting his horse, a smirk playing on his lips. He held a sheaf of papers. "Mrs. Sarah," he began, his voice oily smooth, "I understand this land, your claim, has some irregularities. My investigations show that certain documents were not filed correctly during the recent troubles. It seems, according to the letter of the law, this land is no longer rightfully yours." Sarah's heart pounded. "What are you talking about? This is our land. Thomas and I filed everything properly." Blackwood chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound. "Perhaps you thought you did, but the records say otherwise. And I, Mrs. Sarah, am here to make sure the law is followed. This land, I'm afraid, is now mine." He gestured around with a flourish, as if already owning everything Sarah and Thomas had worked so hard to build. A cold fear, far worse than any fever, began to grip Sarah. News travels fast in a small prairie town, especially when it concerns injustice. Thomas, after hearing Blackwood's threats, quickly spread the word. Within hours, wagons and horses began to converge on Sarah and Thomas's claim. It wasn't just idle curiosity. It was a gathering born of deep respect and gratitude. Mrs. O'Malley, leaning on her husband's arm, her voice still a little weak but firm, spoke first. "This land belongs to Sarah and Thomas. She saved my family. She helped bring us back from death's door." Little Timmy, now robust and lively, clutched his mother's skirt, his bright eyes wide with understanding. Mr. Henderson, the old man Sarah had helped, stood tall despite his age. "When I couldn't lift my head, Sarah was there," he boomed, his voice echoing across the open land. "She brought the medicine. She cooled my brow. She gave of herself when no one else could." Others nodded, a chorus of agreement rippling through the crowd. "She gave her wedding veil," someone called out, the knowledge of Sarah's ultimate sacrifice now common currency. Farmer McGregor, wiping his brow, stepped forward. "We all remember Blackwood. We remember who helped us when the fever came, and we remember who didn't." The mood shifted from quiet outrage to a unified front. It wasn't just words. It was a powerful, unspoken promise. These were people who had stared down death, who had seen true kindness and sacrifice. They would not stand by and let a greedy man steal what belonged to one of their own, especially not Sarah. The air crackled with their collective determination. Silas Blackwood, who had always relied on paper and law, suddenly found himself facing something far more powerful, a united community. He looked from face to face, seeing not just individual farmers and their wives, but a solid wall of angry, determined people. Old Mr. Henderson, still strong, moved forward, placing a hand firmly on Sarah's shoulder. Mrs. O'Malley, with little Timmy holding tightly to her dress, stood directly in front of Sarah's cabin door. Even Mr. Abernathy, the trading post owner, had arrived, his arms crossed, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You speak of rules and papers, Mr. Blackwood," Thomas said, stepping forward, his voice calm but firm. "But there's an older law out here on the prairie, the law of good neighbors. And Sarah is the best neighbor any of us could ask for." Blackwood tried to bluster, to pull out his documents, but his voice was swallowed by the murmuring crowd. He saw the glint of a pitchfork held by one farmer, the firm set of a jaw on another. These weren't city folk who would be easily swayed by legal jargon. These were people who had built their lives with their own hands, who understood true value, and who would protect what was theirs. The sheer number of people, their quiet strength, and their unwavering loyalty to Sarah was a force Blackwood hadn't accounted for. Every single person there, from the smallest child to the oldest elder, stood as one, a living shield around Sarah and her home. Silas Blackwood's smug smile slowly melted away. His eyes darted from one stern face to another, taking in the sheer number of people, the quiet but powerful anger in their eyes. He had expected to intimidate a young woman, perhaps a few scattered neighbors. He had not expected to face an entire community, hardened by prairie life and bound by loyalty. The air, once filled with his own self-important words, was now thick with the unspoken thread of their unity. He saw the pitchforks, the axes leaning against wagons, not as weapons, but as symbols of their resolve. He tried one last time to regain his composure. "This is highly irregular. You are interfering with legal matters," he sputtered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "The only irregularity here, Mr. Blackwood," Thomas said, stepping closer, "is your attempt to steal from folks who've worked honestly for what they have. And we won't stand for it." Blackwood saw that he was beaten. There was no argument he could win against such solidarity. He couldn't fight them all, and he knew it. His grand scheme had crumbled under the weight of simple human kindness and unwavering support. With a frustrated huff, he crumpled his papers, stuffed them into his coat, and turned abruptly. He mounted his horse with less flourish than he had arrived, his face red with a mixture of anger and defeat. Without another word, he spurred his horse and galloped away, kicking up a cloud of dust that was quickly dispersed by the prairie wind. He never looked back, and he was never seen in that town again. As the dust settled from Blackwood's hasty retreat, a wave of relief washed over Sarah. She looked at Thomas, her eyes filled with unshed tears of gratitude. Then she looked at the faces around her, Mrs. O'Malley, Mr. Henderson, little Timmy, Mr. Abernathy, and so many others, all of them standing shoulder to shoulder, their presence a warm, comforting blanket. They weren't just neighbors. They were her family, her stronghold. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you. Thank you." Mrs. O'Malley stepped forward and gently squeezed Sarah's hand. "You saved us, Sarah. It was our turn to save you." Mr. Henderson nodded, a deep, knowing look in his eyes. A debt repaid, and then some. The sun, now high in the sky, seemed to shine brighter, casting a golden glow over the scene. Sarah felt a profound sense of peace settle in her heart. She had given up her cherished veil, the symbol of her personal dream, but in return, she had gained something far more precious, the unbreakable bond of a community that knew true loyalty. She knew, without a doubt, that she and Thomas were safe here, on this prairie land they loved. No matter what challenges the future might bring, they would face them together, surrounded by friends who would always have their back, just as she had had theirs. Her wedding day might have been delayed, and her veil gone, but her heart was full, overflowing with the knowledge that she was truly home, surrounded by love and unwavering support.